Alright, good morning-ish, afternoon, brunch time, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from Garage Art, working on oil painting. Here we are. Alright, today to start warming up, I'm going to do a little detailing on the black hole scene. I'm going to add a very pale blue highlight for a third layer of highlights on top of the foremost mountains, and then the next background, or the middle ground mountains there, the purple ones, I'm going to hit with a very light lavender on the highlight side. So I think that's all I'm going to do right now on that, but there we go. Oh yes, and this may be Garage Art's last weekend, so if you need some weird art, come get some. I'm giving it away for dirt. It needs a home, period. I'm trying to get away as much art as cheaply and quickly as possible. I don't know if Garage Art will exist as of next weekend after. Who fucking knows? I don't know. Trying to interpret the owner's communications is kind of like trying to read wallpaper and decipher meaning from it. So we'll see. But anyway, here we go. think the third background mountain layer could also use a slightly lighter purple as a highlight to define it more clearly. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that too.
What's up, Nolan? How you doing, man?
Run shit. I was sitting here with you like this. I didn't want you to go.
No, it's all right, dude. I don't breathe. Run shit.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, you said it anyway. I'll throw it in the car. All right, thanks, man.
What the hell else is going on?
Not much, dude. Just working on this. You know, trying to hawk my shit. Get rid of stuff before God knows what happens. I'm going to give these stack of wooden ones to Hero, so hopefully he's going to show up today. He's been out in Denver. And otherwise, just trying to see. You can read me weird art, man. I'm trying to get stuff cheap, quick. Yeah. Oh, how about you? What's been going on? Anything good?
I think I talked to you since I went on my trip.
Yeah, man. That was a crazy adventure.
Oh, yeah, no, I remember telling you about Lady.
Yeah, and the train synchronicity was really cool.
Yeah. Well, nothing else since then.
Yeah, back to work, same old.
Just, yeah. Trying to decide what I'm going to do with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I started asking around. I had to spend more than half of my net income. Would ask anything even remotely interesting. I've lived with people all my life, and I'd love to be able to just like have my own space for a year, 2 years, a couple years, something like that. But
I've been drifting since I was 16 years old, man. All I ever fucking wanted was some place that I could call mine. And it doesn't seem to be in the cards for a lot of people right now. It's a fucked up mess, man. I applied for public housing, so I'm just waiting to hear back from them, and I hope I can get something that's in my price without having to find something else to subsist, you know, and the rest of what I'm doing with art. But it's like, you know, because if I get supplemental income from another job, they put a gun to my head with paperwork and social.
right.
And that's scary.
Oh, paperwork.
Yeah.
No, it's fucking mess.
You know, man.
Mark's got his shit he's gonna do, and he's basically, you know, he's been putting me a little bit of a deal.
Yeah.
I can't imagine anybody looking for a regular place really being okay with that situation.
Yeah, man, the same here. I'm really happy that I've had the space, but once again, I haven't had water in 4 years, running water. The roof looks like a sieve, and when I told Mark the electric socket blew up a $250 surge protector that I had, he said, sounds dangerous. He doesn't give a shit.
He is the king of deferred maintenance.
Yeah, dude. So,
Non-maintenance.
you know, I wish him well. It's been a good deal, but I gotta find something.
Yeah, I know. It's a challenge right now. If I hear of something that sounds like, I mean, I was talking to a guy, he's been friendly with me, I know him.
Alright, brief intermission for conversation with Norm about Alfred North Whitehead, quantum mechanics, Bruce Dahmer, the requester calls in the universe, Prigozhin, and a handful of other things. Norm's always fun to talk to. But anywho, back to this. I'll put my music back on.
Sure you had enough. It's like don't let yourself go. 'Cause everybody cries. Everybody hurts sometimes. Sometimes everything's wrong.
Okay. So I guess that was like a 30-second session. That's okay. That's pretty close. But anyway, that gives a lot more depth and dimension to the mountains and the black hole scene. I guess I'm going to switch over to scales. I might do something else with the rest of the scene, broad strokes wise, before I dig into scales. So I'm going to set it down for a minute, think about it, and come back in a minute. Just get aimed at. There we go. Alright, that's fine for scale work. Alright, back shortly.
Century. This
Okay, apparently I hit the wrong button again.
was secularized.
Attached a soliloquy and an entire detailing session that just put the camera to sleep. So, anywho, before I started this, I did a little researching onto the source of the quote, "Snatch the pearl, wisdom, freedom from the dragon time." And apparently it's a misquote from John Steinbeck's The Pearl, or an adaptation or a summary of some of the themes in the book into its own little thing, and was originally apparently sourced by Ram Dass, is the one who said that. So I may use that. I may do a little reading on The Pearl. I'm a big John Steinbeck fan. I loved Of Mice and Men and Grapes of Wrath, but I have not read The Pearl yet. But anyway, I drew in a pearl circle with a compass and just filled it with silver, so I guess it's not missing too terribly much.
National Academy of Sciences as the official.
And now I'm going to take a little bit of black and just give it a bit of a shadow to define it.
Enable human beings
Fucking
to dominate
camera is on, right?
nature, unleashing
Okay,
a new
there we
era
go.
of prosperity. Well, that vision of progress through science and technology has now conquered the world. No other ideology has ever conquered the world as that one has. Every government in the world is now into economic development through science and technology. It's an enormously successful vision. It's also at the root of our environmental crisis. It's produced all the damaging effects that we're living with today and fearing more of in the future. But this is an idea that had a huge influence. By the end of the 18th century, most European intellectuals and American intellectuals had adopted this philosophy. It was part of the Enlightenment cult of science and reason. And this led to the idea of human progress. But the rest of the world was thought to be static. The universe was eternal, the species of animals and plants were fixed. Only humans underwent this progress. It was essentially a religious idea in a secularized form. But by the middle of the 19th century, the idea of evolution was extended to all of life. In Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, 1859, the idea was the whole of life evolves. All living beings have appeared, they've developed through time, through a vast evolutionary process. Darwin hardly ever used the word evolution, I think only twice in The Origin of Species, his most famous book. Instead he used the word progress. And so he thought this was the progressive view of life being extended to all of nature. So now we had human beings progressing through science, technology and social reform. We had now the whole of life progressing from humble beginnings through more complex life forms right up to the present day. But the rest of the universe was not progressing. Some philosophers like Herbert Spencer in England and Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels said that progress must be a universal law, not just a biological law. But the physicists said, no, forget it, that's not what's happening. The universe is eternal, and not only is it not progressing, it's actually running down. By then they discovered the second law of thermodynamics that says that no, you can't have perpetual motion machines. So they had the idea that the whole universe was eternal but gradually running out of steam, so that it would eventually freeze up in a universal heat death, but then remain frozen forever. So instead of the universe progressing, it wasn't. It was going downhill. And by the beginning of the 20th century, European intellectuals, more in Europe than America, were obsessed with the ultimate futility of life on Earth, human life, because all of evolution here was a flash in the pan in a universe doomed to extinction, a universe headed nowhere. A pessimistic kind of cosmic pessimism. By the 1920s and 30s, people were beginning to realize the universe was expanding. And in the 1960s, with the discovery of the cosmic microwave background radiation, the Big Bang theory became orthodox in physics. So since 1965, we've had the idea that the universe began very, very small and very hot, less than the size of the head of a pin to start with, and it's been expanding and cooling ever since. And as it expands and cools, new forms of matter come into being: atoms, molecules, stars, galaxies, planets. Everything in the universe has evolved. Nothing was there in the beginning at the Big Bang except this seething mass of undifferentiated heat and energy. So now we've got an entire universe that's evolutionary. And evolutionary cosmology has extended what was originally a Jewish religious vision through these progressive developments, through Christianity, through the early prophets of science and technology, through economic growth and development, through biological evolution, to the entire cosmos. Now, this is a huge change. It means that one of these worldviews, the evolutionary worldview, has now become completely predominant on a cosmic level. Where does that leave the eternal laws of nature and the eternity of matter and energy? Well, it leaves them sort of hanging in a void, because and if you ever meet any of these hard-nosed, aggressive materialist types, try out a question on them. Say, do you believe in the Big Bang? And they'll almost certainly say yes. And then you say, well, where were the laws of nature before the Big Bang? And you see, if they're eternal, they should have existed before the Big Bang, but where? There's no where for them to be. There's clearly a metaphysical or philosophical idea that is nothing to do with hard-nosed empirical science. And science is actually based on this implicit philosophy. In fact, modern science is based on an idea that my friend Terence McKenna used to say, that it's based on the idea of give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And the one free miracle is the coming into being of the entire universe, all the matter and energy in the universe, and all the laws that govern it, from nothing in a single instant. So the Big Bang theory is radically evolutionary, and it raises the question that if everything else evolves, why can't the laws of nature evolve too?
Alright,
Why not?
and apparently I hit the right
there's
button,
nothing, we
and that
can't
seems to
prove
still
they
be
were there
working.
as
So that's
form
good.
they are today at the moment of the Big Bang.
And I
Everything's
guess the first
evolutionary, why not
session of me
laws?
discoloring
And
a
as soon
circle
as you ask
with
that
silver
question,
isn't entirely
you realize
necessary.
that the concept
But
of laws
damn,
of
the
nature is
slightest
very
little thing is just sending me over the fucking edge right
the
now.
idea of law
I gotta
is confined to human societies, and in fact to civilized
Try and
societies.
find a balance for my cat's sick.
It projects
So
onto
anyway,
the whole
let's
of
take a
nature
break,
a very
have a
human
bong rip,
concept.
and we'll get back to
As
it.
C.S. Lewis once said, to say that a stone falls to earth because it's obeying a law makes it a man and even a citizen. Just chemicals and genes just
Okay,
couldn't possibly
right button
begin to
pressed,
explain this kind of thing.
picking up with yellow scales. Making sure it's fucking working.
I'm suggesting that morphic fields depend on morphic resonance. They have a kind of memory from many members of the
enough. Here we
species
go.
in the past. Since all the members of the species are slightly different, it means the fields are probability structures. And here's an analogy. These are average scientists from the John Innes Institute in Norwich, England, made by superimposing photos of 30 female and 45 male scientists. And what you see is a kind of probabilistic outline of the average scientist's face. And I think if you could see morphogenetic fields, they'd be a bit like that, sort of blurred at the edges. They work probabilistically, like quantum fields. And morphic fields are arranged in nested hierarchies. These could be subatomic particles in atoms, atoms in molecules, molecules in crystals, or they could be organelles in cells, in tissues, in organs, in organisms, in societies of organisms. Everywhere in nature we find this nested hierarchy, this ordering of parts within wholes, and the parts are themselves wholes at lower levels. And at each level the whole is more than the sum of the parts, because, I would suggest, it has a morphic field, which is what gives it its wholeness. So, that's a very brief overview of some of the ideas about morphic fields. And what I'm going to do now is take a huge jump, because we're covering virtually everything today. I mean, Bruce and I between us are going to cover all the mysteries of the universe. We're not going to solve them all, but we're going to touch on them here and there. So I'm moving now on to the mind and the nature of the mind. I think that the organization of the brain depends on fields. Sorry, I'm just turning this off. Sorry, hang on. Just got to get rid of this from the screen. Do you know how I do that, Bruce? It's Bruce's computer, so... oh, yes. Oh, yes, I thought I'd done that. Okay, thanks. Good, that will be next. Okay, the mind. I think that the mind, the brain is organized by morphic fields which influence probabilistic processes. Morphogenetic fields shape the body. Then there's behavioral or motor fields which shape the activity of the nervous system by imposing patterns on what would otherwise be chaotic activities. Then there are social fields that organize social groups like flocks of birds and schools of fish and termite colonies. All of these are called morphic fields. All of them have morphic resonance. Morphogenetic fields are specifically those concerned with the development of form and maintenance of bodies. So they're like a species of the bigger genus morphic field. Now, when it comes to the nature of the mind, what I'm going to suggest now is that our minds depend on fields, and that the fields of our minds extend far beyond our brains. The standard view within science is that the mind is the brain. Mental activity is brain activity. This is the materialist philosophy of mind. And this is the taken for granted view in medical schools and in universities all over the world. It's never been proved, it doesn't make sense to most people, but nevertheless it's taken for granted within scientific institutions. I'm suggesting instead that our minds extend out beyond our brains into the world around us through fields. We're all used to the idea that fields extend beyond material objects. Magnetic fields extend beyond magnets. The Earth's gravitational field extends beyond the Earth to keep the Moon in orbit, for example. And the field of a cell phone extends beyond the cell phone. All that's standard modern technology, which is nearly all field-based. I'm suggesting minds are like that too, that the mind isn't just inside the head, but stretches out beyond it. And as soon as we get the idea that our minds can be extended beyond the brain, a lot of otherwise puzzling phenomena make sense. So I'm going to consider first vision as an example of this. What happens when you see something? Like you're seeing me now, and what's going on while that happens? Well, part of it's well known. Light's reflected from me, reaches your eyes through the electromagnetic field, small inverted images on your retinas, changes in the cone cells, impulses up the optic nerves, and activity in various parts of the brain. So far, so good. But all it gets us is activity in various parts of the brain. That's rather different from vision. The first problem is that science can't explain consciousness. There's no explanation in physics and chemistry for consciousness. And this is now called the hard problem, because no one knows how to solve the problem of consciousness from regular mechanistic science. But the second problem is less widely discussed, and that is that all this is meant to happen in your brain. So when you see me standing here now, what's happening is that changes are happening in your brain that mysteriously, in a way that no one can understand or explain properly, become conscious. But it's all meant to be inside your head. You have some kind of virtual reality display inside your brain that has an image of me in it, and this room and everybody else here, inside your head. Now, I'm guessing it doesn't actually feel as if it's all inside your head. And the theory I'm putting forward is so simple, it's hard to grasp. And that is that your image of me isn't located inside your head, it's located right here, outside your head, and it's in your mind, but it's not inside your brain. So I'm suggesting vision involves a two-way process, the inward movement of light and the outward projection of images. That everything you're seeing around you is projected out to where it is. Occasionally this goes wrong, then you have hallucinations or illusions. But usually it works well enough, and if it didn't work well, if you were projecting images to the wrong place, you wouldn't have got here this morning. You just need to project things accurately to the right place to survive and to move around. So I'm suggesting that vision involves a two-way process, inward movement of light, outward projection of images in mental fields. These are a kind of morphic field through which we're projecting out the whole world. If you look at the sky, you're projecting it out up to the sky. If you look at stars, you're literally projecting your mind out over astronomical distances. The conventional view is that it's all in the head, and the conventional view says that when you look at the sky you're seeing is inside your head. And as a recent paper in a leading scientific journal put it, it asked the question, is your skull beyond the sky? Because if it's in your head what you're seeing, it should be, the skull should be beyond the sky. The answer that he gave was yes, it is, because it's all inside the brain. It's counterintuitive, and in fact I think it's wrong, but that's the official view. I'm suggesting it really, the projected images are out there. That means you might be able to affect things by looking at them. It means you might be able to affect other people by looking at them. Of course, if they know you're looking at them, this is ordinary psychology. If you look at someone from behind, maybe you can affect them just by staring at them from behind. Does that happen? Well, the answer, according to surveys, is that most people have had that experience. How many people here have felt they were being stared at from behind? Well, that's almost everybody. Surveys show that it's over 90% in a normal population. there is a slight sex difference. More women than men have experienced being stared at, and more men than women have experienced staring at others and making them turn around. Well, most of us are mere amateurs, but through a research assistant of mine, I interviewed security personnel, private detectives, the drug squad at Heathrow, the police training college in England, sheriffs involved in surveillance work in the United States, and so on, store detectives and others. They all know about this. They take it for granted that if you're looking at someone, they're likely to turn around. These are people who spend all day watching other people. They're experts. In the martial arts, it's taken for granted. You can train your sensitivity to being looked at from behind. Very useful if someone's creeping up to attack you from behind. In the British Special Forces, the SAS, when people are trained how to creep up behind someone to stab them in the back, they're trained not to stare at the guy's back because he's likely to turn around and shoot you first. So these things are well known in the security and the military areas and in the martial arts. What does science have to say about this? The answer is practically nothing. Between 1895 and 1985, there's a total of 4 published papers in the whole scientific literature on this feeling of being stared at. The first 2 were written by skeptics, simply dismissing it as an illusion, as a common illusion. Well, it's found all over the world. Adults have it, children have it. The reason I think it's so widespread is because it really happens, because most people have experienced it. I've done many experiments that are designed to test this. The simplest ones involve people working in pairs. One's blindfolded, the other one either looks or doesn't look in a random sequence. You have to guess if you're being looked at. Most people are right above chance levels. Now, hundreds of thousands of these tests have been done. Many of them have been done in schools, because children are more sensitive than adults. And school teachers are actually quite open to doing this in schools. Most of them are well aware of the power of the gaze. It's part of their stock in trade. And so these experiments on the sense of being stared at have been done on a mass scale now. You can find a summary of these results in my book, The Sense of Being Stared At. Also on my website, the technical papers. It's also been done in a science museum in Amsterdam. Over 20,000 people have done this experiment already, and the results are overwhelmingly significantly positive. It seems to happen, even through windows, even through one-way mirrors, even through closed-circuit television. There have been experiments on CCTV showing people can tell when they're being stared at. So it does seem to happen. Therefore, there's something about looking at people that seems to be able to affect them, and that shouldn't happen if it's all inside the brain. Yet the evidence is overwhelmingly in favour of it being real. And that is one way, I think, in which our minds project out into the environment. They connect us with what we're looking at, in accordance with our attention. The word attention comes from the Latin root ad tendere, to stretch towards. Our minds stretch towards things that we pay attention to. Well, animals seem to be sensitive as well. Many people have found that they can attract the attention of animals by staring at them. Some people have found it works the other way around. And I think this has an evolutionary origin. Prey animals that could detect when predators are looking at them would probably survive better than ones that couldn't detect it.
There's only like 1 or 2 scales left on the foreground, so I'm going to have to go in kind of reverse thought about what the next color placement's going to be to start from the head and work my way down. I'm pretty sure I'll do another session today, so that's it for the moment. I'm going to cut it here and come back with different color for scales. Okay, triple checking the right button was pushed. Let's not have Adam freak out again. And we're moving on to pink for scale color.
Normally it's triggered by hearing the baby cry.
There.
And it's an oxytocin mediated
Stared at the pearl for a while. I think I like it. I think that's a really nice addition. I might give it an aura or a series of multiple colored auras, but with the figures that I want populating the Dragon Road, I'm not sure how that's going to work in the composition entirely yet. So I'll probably just leave that, let it set up, and let it dry before I decide what I'm doing next. Debating working on some skin tones here in a minute, but for right now, I'm going to dig into dragon scales again, top to bottom
until
with
fairly
pink.
recently, they just go home. Nowadays, they call home on the cell phone to find out if the baby really does. They're usually right. We did a detailed study with 20 lactating mothers in North London to find out whether or not these letdown events when they're away from their baby did in fact correspond to the baby's needs. We did an analysis that ruled out synchronized rhythms. So we're looking at unexpected letdowns. And we found there was an extraordinarily significant correlation, odds against chance of 1 billion to 1. This is summarized in my book, The Sense of Being Stared At. Many mothers go on having a bond with their children as they grow up. We have endless case histories of mothers who've suddenly felt they've got to go home or they've got to call home just when a child's had an accident. This continues throughout life in some cases. Women in all our surveys turn out to be more sensitive than men to these kinds of things. And the most sensitive couplings of mothers and daughters. In many, many cases where mothers and daughters seem to retain this intuitive telepathic connection right through their lives. So the mother and baby telepathy is one situation which seems to show a clear biological effect. It's not that the mother thinks of the baby and then the milk lets down, it's the other way around. It's the body responding and then she thinks of the baby. Telepathy works at a basic biological, physiological level. It's not primarily to do with higher thought processes, rational processes. It's a kind of need-based response, emotionally based response. In my surveys and natural history of telepathy in the human realm, I discovered, rather to my surprise, that the commonest kinds of telepathy in the modern world occur in connection with technology, particularly telephones. And I found that in the US, Britain, and in Europe and in South America, about 80% of the population claim to have had experiences of telephone telepathy. In other words, you think of somebody for no apparent reason, then there's a call, and there's that person who says, "Oh, it's funny, I was just thinking about you." How many people here have had that kind of experience? And again, the great majority. I looked through the scientific literature and I found this had never been investigated. The only scientific response I came across was the standard armchair skeptical argument that tries to dismiss it, whereby skeptics say, well, this isn't really a telepathic response, it's simply you think about people all the time, someone then rings and you imagine it's telepathy and you forget the millions of times you're wrong. Now, they have no evidence that you're wrong millions of times. This is simply a speculative argument with no evidence at all that supports it. And I then tried to set up experiments. I did set up experiments to test if that skeptical theory is true or not. How we do the experiments is this. Imagine you're the subject. You volunteer as a subject. And you then give us the names of 4 people it might happen with, people you know well, family members or close friends. You then sit at home being filmed next to a landline telephone with no caller ID system, and we then pick one of the 4 callers at random, ring them up and ask them to call you. So the phone rings, you know it's one of these 4 people. Before you pick it up, you have to guess which one. You say it to the camera, I think it's John, you pick it up, hi John, you're right or you're wrong. And by pure guessing, you'd be right one time in 4, 25%. In fact, in these tests, people are right very much more than the chance level, over 40%. They're not right every time, because this is a very artificial experiment. People are not ringing because they've got a real need or a real intention to get in touch with you. They're just ringing because it's part of an experiment. But nevertheless, this has worked extremely well, and I've published several papers on this, and it's been repeated in other places in the world. And I have here an experiment that shows a repetition of it for British television. a television company heard about these experiments, and they came to me and said, we'd like to do this for television. And I said, well, do you want to film the people I've been doing research with? And they said, no, we don't want to use the people you've been doing research with. They're just ordinary people. This is TV. We need celebrities. So I said, well, you can't just have random celebrities. They've got to know each other well. And they came up with a 1980s girl band called the Nolan Sisters, who are perfect for this. They know each other well. They're Irish. They have Irish in origin. They've lived together very close to each other. And so we did an experiment for television with the Nolan Sisters on telephone telepathy. And I have that here. Now, let's see if we can get this to work. There we are. If you look at the modern world, despite all discouragement, most people believe that they've had telepathic experiences. And interestingly, the most common kind of telepathy in the modern world is precisely one that's grown up alongside technologies. In other words, telepathy connected with telephone calls.
So many people tell stories of telephone telepathy, but Dr. Sheldrake devised a test to see whether someone could predict who, out of 4 people, was calling them. The probability of being correct by guesswork alone was 25%.
We've now completed 1,000 of these trials, and the average success rate is 42%, which is hugely significant statistically. People certainly aren't right every time, but it's way above what you'd expect by chance.
So, is telephone telepathy real, or is it just a figment of the imagination? We brought one of the most successful girl bands of the 80s to London to find out. The Nolan Sisters are one of the closest families in showbiz. At the height of their fame, they spent months on the road together, and most of them still live within miles of each other.
I'm Rupert Shaw.
But how well will they do in the telephone telepathy test?
Could you tell me all your names and ages, please?
Yes, I'm Denise Nolan. I'm the most intelligent one here. I'm Maureen. She's just Maureen. Hi, I'm Linda, and Denise is a liar. I'm Colleen. Colleen is the youngest, and I'm Anne. I'm the eldest.
Why do you say that?
Because I don't like to say I look good at my age. You don't. You don't. Not really.
The first stage of the experiment is to decide which of the sisters will be the receiver.
So 4 of you are going to stay here. 1 of you is going to go to the hotel and try and guess which of the others is phoning. So we've got to pick the person to do that.
It's got to be Colleen.
Colleen is nominated by her sisters because she's the youngest. And while she's driven a mile away to the other location, Dr. Sheldrake allocates each of the other sisters a number between 1 and 4. For each trial, a throw of the dice will determine who will be the caller.
So we're going to start now with the first one. I'm going to throw the die. 2. Here you are, Maureen. So you've only got 2 minutes.
Maureen's first up, and the rest of the group must leave the room to allow her to focus. When the phone rings, Colleen will have to say who she thinks is calling before she picks up.
Right. Maureen. Maureen. Yes! Oh, yes! Yes! Thank God for that. Thank you, lovely talking to you. Bye. Bye. You should get it. Oh, bloody hell. True.
But that could just be coincidence. Next up is Anne, the only sceptic among the sisters.
Denise.
No, you're wrong. With 4 sisters to choose from, if it's purely guesswork, Colleen should expect to be right 25% of the time by the end of the experiment.
Think of your favourite sister. The most talented one.
I'm not getting anything now. I don't want to be wrong. Linda.
Yes! Yes! Good! You know it!
Thank you. Oh, bye. Bye.
Yes!
That's good, isn't it?
Halfway through, and Colleen is a long way ahead of the 25% expected by chance alone. Anne's number has come up 4 times, but for the previous 3, Colleen has guessed wrong.
Yes! Hooray! I knew you loved me, Lily.
3/4 of the way through, and Colleen's hit rate has reached over 40%. According to Dr. Sheldrake, this indicates there's more going on than simple guesswork.
Linda.
Yes! Yes! I'm good!
I'm so impressed. I'm scaring them now. They're backing out the room. They should never have gone in there with you, love.
Fantastic. Thank you. Bye.
Wow. Colleen's final score is 50%, one of the highest of over 1,000 tests conducted by Dr. Sheldrake.
Anyway, well done. I think that was great.
Thank you.
That was very nice.
I enjoyed it.
Well done, Doctor.
Cheers! Don't block my face.
Well, the latest form of telepathic communication that's evolved along with technology is the telepathic email. And we've done very similar experiments involving 4 emailers, people guessing who they're about to get an email from, with very similar results, actually somewhat higher results than telephone telepathy. I now have a series of automated tests. The idea for these first arose right here, actually, in the Seattle area. A couple of years ago I was in Seattle and I was asked to give a seminar at the Microsoft Research Center. It's actually one of the things that put me off PowerPoint. It's only Bruce's mentoring that's enabled me to get so far as I have today. Because when I went to Microsoft at Redmond, Washington, to give my seminar, I turned up with my Mac memory stick, thinking that would be enough. I asked them before lunch if we could test the equipment, and they said it was quite unnecessary. In the research centre we've got a state-of-the-art seminar room, every form of it. So I said, well, I'd like to test it anyway. And we tried it out, and it just wouldn't work, because it was a Mac memory stick, and they only had PCs. So one of them said, I'll go and try and find a Mac somewhere on the campus. They did, and they emailed the things over to the PC in the seminar room. And then just before the seminar, I said, look, I would like to test this once more. It still didn't work. And they said, look, there must be something wrong with the system here. I said, well, you know, it is a Microsoft system, and if you can't fix it, who can? They're desperately trying to fix it. The seminar began, and they still hadn't got it working. So I said, well, look, I've had so many problems with this that I always carry as a backup my overhead transparencies, and I pulled them out of my case. I said, I think we're going to have to revert to the overhead projector. And then they said, oh, we still got one. And then 5 minutes into the seminar, there was a trundling noise as a technician came dusting off the overhead projector. So after that, I thought, well, if it doesn't work at Microsoft, I'll just go back to overheads everywhere. But now, with Bruce's help, I've moved into this modern age. Anyway, One of the things that they were very interested in was the possibility of setting up an automated email telepathy test which could run on an MSN Messenger platform or something like that, and would have enabled millions of people to do these kinds of tests, finding out how telepathic they are. Some people at Microsoft had invited me because they thought that was a real possibility. They were very, very excited about it. So was I. And indeed, the seminar went extremely well. And afterwards, there were some of them who really wanted to do this. But others said, no, look, we can't do this because telepathy is kind of flaky and, we've got our corporate image to think about. And I said, well, actually, your corporate image isn't that great. And, it went to higher authorities and they struck down the idea. But I've since been approached by a range of other companies, including most recently Google and AOL. And I've developed already an automated email telepathy test that's running now in a prototype form on my own website. And if this works, it seems to be working pretty well so far. We're getting above chance significant results. This could easily go public on a huge scale. In the meantime, I have to test out the system we've got. And here's somewhere where some of you might want to help. First of all, anyone can help by just doing it. It's on my website. You go to the online experiments portal at www.sheldrake.org. Try the email telepathy test. If you'd like to help further, I have a kind of pyramid selling scheme where you can become a research helper. I'm now funded from Cambridge University, rather surprisingly, for this research. And I can appoint you as a research helper if you think you can recruit 5 other people to do the test. You get paid for that. You also get a certificate of research experience, which helps your CV. At least in some areas it would, to have a certificate of research experience in telepathy. In others, you'd probably better not mention it. If you'd like, there's also on my website information about the Research Helper Program. So try it yourself first, and if you'd like to be part of this, become a research helper. And I have a range of other tests that I'm asking people to help me with, so you can be part of this research program if you'd like to be. I've also developed an automated text message telepathy test for the younger telepaths. And this is now running in North London, mostly with teenagers doing it. Text messaging is more advanced in Europe than in the United States, where it's still mostly confined to much younger people, teenagers and people in their 20s. But the market's growing here quite fast. And I gave a seminar at the Esalen Institute recently, and the woman who set up a commercial text messaging company in LA was very keen to work on this with me, to develop this as a commercial product. How telepathic are you? Try the text message telepathy test. You get your own score. This is also up and running, but it's not working yet in the US. It's working only in Britain at the moment, the text message test. But watch this space. It could soon become available here. And I have a range of other automated tests on my website. So there's something anyone can do who'd like to take part in this research. Well, that's more or less where I am at the moment with these automated tests, because I think that's the way to go. There's, in trying to persuade people within the scientific world that these things really happen, the problem is really a social one, an institutional one. Plenty of scientists know that animals and people can be telepathic, that they have psychic abilities. They know this because they've experienced it themselves or with members of their family. Lots of scientists, who are after all mostly normal people, when they get home in the evening have dogs waiting for them at the door. They know this is happening, and yet institutionally there's a kind of taboo. So most scientists don't talk about these things to their colleagues.
All right, that ties the pink thread from the top into the previous pink thread at the bottom and evens it out a little bit.
quite different people.
So I'm going to cut it here.
I think actually the main way in which science...
Take a rest and come.
The experience of simultaneously
Alright, now I'm going to hit the silver
many
that I
levels
used for the
of
pearl
awareness.
and continue the thread from the neck head area.
So that I can understand that at the same time I am involved in what you will excuse
maybe I
my
should swap
language
sides. I've
is
been on
the
this side
game
for a while.
of lecturing.
Just for fun. Why not?
Right. I can also, I think, stand aside and see myself involved in the game of lecturing.
There we go.
And I also can jump to some other levels of consciousness in which I can see relationships between us other than the social role which we are presently involved in, that is of lecturer and audience.
Alright, that's cool. That works. Alright, here we go.
And at times I even realize that we are all slowed down life. Now, the second point Frank makes is the realization of depth and height, for which no words exist. And I want to read to you a very brief example of that. This is in a book called Black Elk Speaks. It's the life story of a holy man of the Ogallala Sioux. And it's an extraordinary book, and it describes this black elk's first mystic visionary experience, which sounds very much like hundreds of psychedelic reports I have back in the files. This is the one he had when he was 9 years old. And he said, "And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in a sacred manner the shapes of all things in the spirit, and the shape of all shapes, as they must live together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and as starlight. And in the center grew one mighty flowering tree, to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy." I am sure now that I was then too young to understand it all, and that I only felt it. It was the pictures I remembered, and the words that went with them, for nothing I have ever seen with my eyes was so clear and bright as what my vision showed me. And no words that I have ever heard with my ears were like the words I heard. I did not have to remember these things. They have remembered themselves all these years. It was as I grew older that the meanings came clearer and clearer out of the pictures and the words. And even now I know that more was shown to me than I can tell. And I think for most of us that describes a component of our own experiences. The third thing Frank mentions is sensitivity of breadth of consciousness of others. Now here I think that there is an absolutely fascinating research area concerning empathy and ESP. When I was running a session, guiding a session, at one point a fellow said to me, let me explain what I was doing. I was lying there listening to music and I was being with him. Now this was in silence, so that primarily what happened was I suddenly got a picture of the inside of his head. And it looked like caves, there were waterfalls, it was dark and mysterious and jungly. And I was in the midst of this, and suddenly he turned to me and he said, "Are you inside my head?" Now I put that away because those are the kind of things you don't like to think about. And about a week later I was guiding a session for a political science professor at Harvard. And this time I got another visual image, and I was in a French cathedral, very stately, kind of cold, formal. And while I was walking with my footsteps echoing down the halls of this cathedral, he turned to me and he said, "I have the strangest feeling that you're inside my head." That's the way chance works. At one point, I had a session with a fellow. We took 700 micrograms in the middle of the day, sitting in two upright chairs facing one another in an empty room. He had created the setting, I had not. Now, this was a little much for me, and I found myself glued against the back of the chair while he danced about me, playing the horn, whispering in my ear, showing me beautiful jewels, putting on strange hats. And finally, I went to the floor thinking to myself, if there only wasn't so much light, at which point he walked over and he pulled down the shades. So I thought about that, and I figured, well, that's silly. You know, that's just chance. But what I need is about 10 minutes rest. I thought that, and he said, oh, take 20 or 30. And then he walked over to me and he looked down at me and he laughed. Now, it strikes me that if you read the many reports of ESP experiences that are available, that most of the experiences involve two minds that were working very much in parallel. Mother and child, husband and wife, two intimate friends. And that when you use an experimenter and a subject who hardly know each other at all, you often don't get much better than chance. Although J.B. Ryan has worked hard to show some slight statistical gain. And it seems obvious to me that a very real set of researches can and should be done, in which one creates an opportunity for two people to get, if you will, their mind in phase with one another through the use of psychedelics. Finally, the fourth category that Frank mentions is ability to observe and yet not observe the subject-object distinction. That is, to experience the feeling we are all one at the same time as maintaining the distinctions that exist among us. Now, it is very interesting that the LSD experience comes at a time when Marshall McLuhan, for example, points out that we are in the electric age, when we can extend our central nervous system through technological means to the point where the world becomes like a big village, because everything is instantaneous. We know everything's going on everywhere in the village. And but Buckminster Fuller tells us that it's gotten to the point now where if we all collaborated, there could be enough for everybody. Now we have these psychedelic experiences in which we experience unity and we seek collaborative relationships. And as I experience a unity in the universe, in the world, let's say, I find it very desirable to make it all subject. And I also understand that almost any learning can occur almost instantaneously if one is able to get rid of the subject-object distinction between that which one learns and that which is learned. And you have all had that experience of one-trial learning under conditions where you were really, quote, turned on to the thing you were learning. Okay, now I'm going to stop shortly, but what I asked myself was, well, okay, if this experience is so great, how could I stay high all the time? I could put it in a little more serious vein. Say, how could I stay in a state of ecstasis, that is, a fluid cognitive state? How could I be fully conscious all the time? Well, it's very tempting to figure if you just keep using enough LSD, it'll do it. So we got 5 of us together and we went into a house and we decided to stay high forever. Now, in order to do this, we had to take 400 micrograms every 4 hours.
400 mics.
Or 2,000 micrograms a day.
Hours. 2,000 a day. For anyone listening in the background, that's Ram Dass. Yikes.
And we carried this experiment out roughly in more or less formal fashion,
and amazing that
but
we survived
continuing
this
on the
experiment.
dosage
But here,
for 3 weeks.
Mexicans.
Now, it's very interesting about that experiment, first of all, that I'm here to tell about it. And just a few of the interesting aspects of it. First of all, it was apparent to me that you do not stay at the highest state of consciousness for 3 weeks. You do not stay with the clear white light. You do not stay where all is one in a completely homogeneous field. You stay much more at what you call second bardo. You go way out and then you come back to some middle level, but you definitely stay with a heightened sense of awareness. And then I found an interesting thing about sleep patterns. Because you, after a while, you don't go to sleep and you don't go to sleep, and then you go into neutral. And you're there, and yet you're completely at rest. And 3 weeks later, when I emerged, I was just as physically healthy as when I went in, rested. Okay. And I realized, we broke that experiment up, it fell apart, because we had not made realistic arrangements for dealing with the interface between that experiment and the rest of the world. Because during that experiment, during the initial stages of the experiment, it wasn't possible to carry on a set of external game commitments or external social contracts. And it would seem to me a very reasonable research to carry such an experiment out under conditions where you provide a supportive environment to see what indeed will happen. There was change. But the interesting thing was when we stopped taking the LSD, we all came down. Well, in the past few years, knowing that the government might get some controls on, and also in an attempt to find other ways that one could build into one's life, I've been involved with a macrobiotic diet at some length, with karate at some length, student of Gurdjieff, of Mayor Baba, been involved in dance groups, have been involved in meditation and breathing exercises. Once I had had one psychedelic experience, all these other things worked. Because once you have been one time outside of yourself, and you know where that place is, it's the easiest thing in the world to get back there. And then I started to understand that it was going to be the way in which we created our environment or setting that was going to determine whether we could stay fully conscious all of the time. Because obviously LSD wasn't going to do it. As I understood LSD now, all it did was show you the possibility or remind you of the possibility, but you still had to do the things in your everyday life to make it all work. See, it's a very interesting thing that the Easterner spends 10, 12 years turning off all of his attachments, getting free of all of his commitments, going to the mountaintop, meditating, eating nettle soup, living through snow and sleet and rain, and finally he experiences enlightenment. Maybe, if he's 1 in 10. 1 in 10 after 12 years commitment. Very poor probabilities. But once he's made it, then he can probably retain that heightened sense of integrity with the whole universe because he doesn't have any environment that's going to bring him down. He doesn't go back into a network of habits that are going to catch him back up again. The Westerner doesn't have time. He's not going to go sit in the mountaintop for 12 years with a 1 in 10 chance. Right? But there is a help for him because along come psychedelics mysteriously, just as he's about to blow himself to oblivion. And here now with DMT, we can assure a businessman that during his lunch hour he can have a But probably at 2 p.m. he'll be just as hung up as he was at 10. With a memory in addition, the memory of what that openness was like. So it may turn out, you see, that all the drug did was to take we cynical Westerners and give us hope. By showing us the possibility and starting us, as I was started, on a journey, which is irrevocable. And that the journey will end up taking just as long as it would have had we done it in the East on faith, without knowing what the end point was like. But we didn't have enough faith to do it. Now, we have been through a series of many social community experiments trying to create an environment that would allow you to maintain full consciousness. And all of them have failed, and all of them have taught us a great deal. And I think the word failure is the wrong word. They've all ended. They've ended because they were completed, because we saw the fallacy or the limit of the situation, or it was time to change into another institution. But out of it all, I have come up with some basic rules, I feel, that are reasonable for entering into a community game designed to provide an environment for you to have maximum consciousness. First thing involves the numbers. While I think that the acid tests are great for a fleeting moment for many people, large groups provide many nooks and crannies for egos to hide in. At the other end of that continuum, the number 1 is a very risky number to work with, because it appears very easy for you to get caught in your own defenses and be unable, if you will, to up-level them or see through them or get beyond them. Gurdjieff, the Russian philosopher, puts it very well. He says, you don't realize your predicament. You're all in prison. Prisons of your mind. of your learned mind. Were you to escape, the first thing you must realize is that you're in prison. After all, if you think you're free, you can't escape from prison. The second thing is you can't escape alone. You need the help of others. And then finally he points out that you need maps and guides, because after all, you've been in prison ever since you can remember. You don't even know which way is out. So that if we say, well, one isn't quite enough, we try two. Two, which is the marriage unit that exists in our present society, which seems to be having a hard sledding. Problem of two is that people get locked in power struggles. And there's nobody to arbitrate. And sometimes when those struggles get powerful enough, they can ride right through LSD sessions. Well, maybe the number 3. But that's a very sexually risky number. So maybe 4 is the best unit to work with at first. Take 2 couples, because a couple is really the basic unit. Now, if I can understand why most of our experiments have ended, it's because we haven't had the courage, if you will, or the knowledge or the wisdom, to set up contracts for the community in advance of a specific enough nature. It's too easy to get a group of groovy people and say, well, what do you say, let's all live together and it'll be great and we'll all have sessions and we'll go places. Or just to open the door and in come 10 people and you close the door and there's your group. So there is some kind of contract because these kinds of groups often end up in somebody saying, well, look, that isn't what I'm here for. Right? So it's better to set it out in front. So in front, it is agreed that we are a group on a journey together. And that this journey, the goal of this journey is to increase each of our awarenesses, and that we have decided to travel as a group. Now, if you want to travel as an individual, do so, but don't join a group. All right? This is a very specific type of group I'm talking about now, but it works, as far as I understand thus far. Make the definition of the goals as explicit as possible. It has got to be built into the contract that the person understands that the risk is his own identity as he knows himself. This leaves not open to him what is known as the cop-out of saying, oh, well, after all, that's me, that's the way I am.
Like for a few clouds in the sky
today. Available.
But that gets the silver threaded once again from neck to where we left off last time.
The next thing is that for the first period of time after the group is formed, we can do little other than primarily
I may do some more adjusting of the upper black hole landscape
and every participant must be ready
today,
for a total
or some skin value adjustment.
At all times.
So I'm just going to cut it here, and either I'll come back and do a wrap-up clip, or we'll do another session.
Can't get up cranky.
Okay, it is now getting a little late in the day, and the silver thread, I think, is about all I've got in me today. So I'm going to do a pan over here,
He is concerned with peak experiences.
and then on that.
And he points out that most people
Good progress on that today.
have
The
had
mountains are
these
showing some more
experiences at one time or another
depth.
spontaneously, but weren't able to label them. All right, and
Pretty good scale progress today.
as you read through his
It's gonna start
accounts, you
filling in
find a
faster
number of
now.
settings that are
I've got
indeed settings that
totals
seem to precipitate these. Now, if you argue that what you
And
mean by
pearl
turn on is a
placement.
chemical alteration of the brain, that there is clear evidence
Pretty
that the mystic visionaries and the psychedelic visionaries
So,
and the
if anybody
diet
needs any weird
visionaries and
art,
so on
that
were
is
having
Adam
some
Sturch
common
from
core
Garage Art,
spiritual
Taos, New Mexico,
experience. So there
in
was
between
some common
Allsup's and
chemical
Outback
alteration
Pizza for the
occurring to all of
moment.
them.
Thank
Then you
you
notice
for
that
your
this
support
chemical
online,
alteration can be brought
and
about
thank you to the
either
browsers who
from
were in
the
here
body,
today
from
checking
the
stuff
endocrine
out.
system,
Had some
or
enthusiastic
from the
people in here
cerebral
today.
cortex
It was nice.
downward,
So
if you will.
have a
Then
good
you
night.
see
Or
the